Hi, my name is Amy and welcome to What Studios, where chaos reigns. If you caught the last video, you'll be pleased to know that I escaped from the clutches of the Christmas demons totally unharmed. Ooh. Anyway, I'm painting up an Ultramarine as penance for an embarrassing near loss for my Black Legion. I want to look at doing some freehand on the Ultramarine today. I apologise for any extra blurriness in the footage today, but this kind of small detail is kind of hard to capture on camera. First off, we have the lettering. I take some Rhinox hide, mixed with some water and flow aid to get it running very smoothly. Remember to wick off your brush on some paper towel to stop it from running too much. I'm going to write Ultra on this scroll on the shoulder pad, so I start with the vertical line of the T right in the middle. Then I work my way out, at first just sketching in the vertical line of the R, the diagonal lines of the A, and then the 3 vertical lines for the L and the U. You can then fill them in, knowing that the letters are properly spaced. For the purity seals, a series of squiggly lines will do the trick to just give the impression of text. Next, we're going to tackle the Lieutenant's stripe on the helmet. A lot of people struggle to get this straight, so let me show you how I do it. First, we're going to take thinned down Corax white and just paint all of the armour mohawk looking part, avoiding going over the edges. Next, we just need to follow the line of the mohawk down over the face. As it's such a small area, it should be fairly easy to get that line straight, and if it's not, you can always go back to your blue and tidy up. Never be afraid of going back to fix mistakes that you've made. As long as your paint is thin enough to not start building up and clogging details, you can go back and forth as many times as you want. This is the real secret of freehand. Not doing it perfectly the first time, but just making sure you go back and fix all your mistakes. Next, I move back to Mephiston Red. This part's slightly more difficult. Start from the back and work some lines in. First one side and then the other, going back and forth until you're satisfied both are an equal distance from the edge of the mohawk. Then fill it in and extend it, section by section, until you have a solid red stripe in the centre. Again, don't be afraid to jump back and forth between the Corax white and Mephiston Red to clean it up until you're happy with the end result. That's the basic stripes done. We're going to come back and add a little shading to them in a bit, but first let's take a look at some of the freehand details on the tilting shield. I started the process of quartering this little tilting shield on his shoulder in the last video. I want to paint an Imperial Eagle in the top left corner, so I go back to Corax white and paint in a tiny triangle of roughly the right shape. The bottom right corner of the shield I want a checkered pattern, so I start by sketching a grid in Corax White, and then fill it in and tidy up those edges by going back and forth between Corax White and Macragge Blue. Next, I take the Macragge Blue and I go back to my eagle. I just want to paint some very tiny notches in the triangle to give the impression of the wings and the twin heads. At this size, it doesn't need to be perfect, you just need to suggest that there's more detail than there actually is, and your eyes will fill in the rest. I then take some Fenrisian grey and use it to shade the white freehand. I thin it down a lot and gently glaze it over the lower parts of the lieutenant stripe, as well as the check marks. Now I'm going to tackle the upper right quadrant of the shield. I'm going to layer over some Avalanche Sunset, leaving a bit of Baylor brown showing in the bottom third. Then I take Flashgit's yellow and highlight the upper third of the quadrant. Finally, I edge highlight this section with Screaming Skull. I use some Evil Sunz Scarlet to highlight some of the higher parts of the lieutenant's stripe. I then take my Mephiston Red and Incubi Darkness mix from earlier and glaze it over the lower parts of the stripe. Finally, I do an edge highlight along the front with some Trollslayer Orange. For the eye lenses, I paint roughly 2/3 of the eye in Mephiston Red, trying to deposit more paint towards the inner edge and the bottom of the eye. Next, I use Evil Sunz Scarlet, basically trying to draw a line along the bottom of the eye, thicker on the inner edge and trailing off about halfway towards the outer edge. Now, being as thin as possible, I take Trollslayer Orange and get a thin line on that inner corner, probably covering about 1/3 of the eye. Finish the lenses off with a dotted Corax White in the outer corner. I stick a transfer on his shoulder pad and use some micro set to get it set flat against the rounded surface. Transfers or decals are a whole other in-depth topic that many people have made videos about, so I won't go into the application here, but we will look at how to paint over them to make them fit better with your model. After applying the transfer, I give the whole model a coat of matte varnish with my airbrush. This is a step you can miss out if you don't have access to an airbrush, as sprayed can or brush varnish can be a little bit hit or miss. I'd really recommend it if you can though, as it adds a lot to your final model. We do this now to avoid matting down our shiny metallics later. Okay, so you can see how our transfer got a crack in it during application. That's fine, it helped the transfer conform to the rounded shape of the pauldron, and we can fix that up easily. I used some Evil Sunz Scarlet to fix the gap in the skull, and some Corax White to fix the one in the Ultramarines symbol. I again used my Fenrisian Grey glaze, carefully adding some shading to the transfer. I also used my Mephiston Red and Incubi Darkness mix to add shading to the skull. Now I can start on my metallics. I take Retributor armour and paint all of the gold details, such as the trim, jewellery and any Space Marine bling you can find. Next I take a 50-50 mix of black metal and thrash metal by scale 75 and I base all the parts that are going to be steel. The chains, the gun details, backpack vents and the inside of the storm shield. If you don't have scale 75 metallic paints, you can use Citadel's lead belcher or similar shades. I also based the coils on the Lieutenant's Volkite pistol in brass scorpion. Now we can shade the gold and brass. I take a 2-to-1 mix of Reichland Flesh Shade and Gore Grunter Fur contrast paint. I don't want to just douse all the gold parts, as I want some of that lovely gold shining through without being matted down by the wash. Instead, I catch all the recesses and try and pick out some areas that would naturally reflect less light and wash them down. If you're struggling to work out where to apply your shade, check out the box art or the examples on the GW website, as they usually do a similar method. A good place to start is the corners of your shoulder pad trim. You can build up 2 or 3 coats of this to really create some nice variations in tone. This method of shading metallics aims to mimic the realistic shading of non-metallic metals in a fraction of the time. So now we have a nice level of contrast in our gold parts. For the steel, I take a 2-to-1 mix of Nuln Oil and Black Templar contrast paint. With this, I'm just going to cover all of the steel parts. There's no need to spend time building up shadows like we did on the gold, as the steel isn't as prominent on this Mini. Next, I highlight the coils in the gun with some Canoptek alloy. I thin some Mephiston Red to flow smoothly off my brush and let it drop between those coils, being as precise as possible. It should just run into the recesses nicely. I also glaze over the edge highlights on the gun casing surrounding the coils, just for a little hint of a glow. Then I use Evil Sun's Scarlet to brighten up the glow in the middle. Like the last coat, this is very thin and I just drop it into the recesses here and there. Next, I'm going to edge highlight all of the metallics. I use Heavy Metal by Scale 75, mixed with a little flow aid again. You don't need to hit every single edge. In fact, doing that can often make a model look a bit too busy. Just focus on areas where more light may reflect, like the top of the shield, the edge of the pauldrons and similar details. You can use Runefag Steel for this if you only have Games Workshop paints. One more detail to do now to finish this up. I want to add an electric effect to the storm shield, so I paint all the little power nodes with Corax white. I sketch some little jagged lines coming out of them. Then I glaze some Athematic blue contrast paints over them to give them a subtle electric blue glow. I'm going to base the model and come back to show you the finished Primaris Lieutenant. I hope very much that you've enjoyed these 2 videos. I find it very helpful every now and then to step outside of just painting things I'm familiar with. It's great practice, and these models have a lot of details on them while still being relatively beginner friendly. I aim to show you a bunch of different techniques for raising your Ultramarines from a basic tabletop standard to a heavy metal inspired display level. You absolutely don't have to use all of these on every single Mini, but I hope you've come away with a few extra tricks in your arsenal to take your painting to the next level. Thanks for watching. I wish you all a happy new year and hope that 2021 brings everyone some much needed relief from the nightmare that was 2020. Stay safe and keep on hobbying.